Hi Guy, welcome to episode 4 of the AMIGArama Podcast. I'm your host, Lefarius. Now it has been pointed out in a few places that I don't actually mention who I am at the beginning of the podcast. I will remind you all, this is only the 4th episode. I am learning as I go along. Yeah, it was probably not such a good idea not to say who I actually am, but we will change that from now on, I promise. Now, before we jump onto the main game, there isn't much news this week, but I did want to talk about something I've been doing Amiga related, and I basically finally managed to sit down and watch the Viva Amiga video documentary. I'm not sure if that's the right way to put it, but I believe this was Indiegogo / Kickstarter type of funding around about 2016. Oh, so it might have been 2015. There's always a bit of a handle on the distance before this, but yeah, it's just over an hour long. I finally sat down and watched a digital copy because it's easy with the setup I've got. And first thoughts were, this is not actually based, I mean, I'm in the UK, so Commodore to me is a completely different story to, say, Europe and US and all the rest of it. So this was a very US-centric documentary. It didn't touch on any of the other countries, really. It was all focused on how they invented the whole Commodore, the original Commodore, and built around it and did their thing, and the first off that did stand out to me, you know, being more UK based person and seeing what like the likes of like Donald Pleasance had on the history and stuff like that. He was not mentioned at all, which was the first big problem I had with it from the off, because he did actually work over there for a good, well, at least a year, and got involved with, you know, after the success he had in the UK with like the Batman pack, and, you know, Commodore in the UK was an absolutely massive thing. It were a bit of a monster, to be honest, but that was not even mentioned. Even when the documentary went into the bit about ESCOM towards the end, and because ESCOM basically bought out Commodore when it was all going, and it made a bit of a disaster and killed the brand towards the end. But there was a huge struggle that I know about with Donald Pleasance trying to buy Amiga out, and it was all around a $50 million figure and all the stuff, and arguing with China and different manufacturers. And all, you know, it's huge. I can't go off onto it here, but to mention ESCOM in a documentary to do with the US side, and not mention Donald Pleasance at all, or even interview him. He's very, very open. He keeps popping up in podcasts, news articles. He's in a load of other documentaries, and it just seemed really weird not for him to be completely brushed past. And as soon as I started thinking about that, and I was like, well, why is he not involved? Why is another country not related to the US when they had such a controlling element? It was very, very strange. And but sorry, that just sounds like I'm going to go off on that for a huge bit. I'm not. I'm going to try and cut that down. But it put me off at that essence straight away. But I tried to be open-minded and give it the rest, because it did go into the whole US side of the history and how Commodore was built up over the years, and the engineers and the control they had. It was very positive and light and breezy look at what they happened. But when you do things like look at the documentary that was released around the mid-90s when Commodore was failing, I think it was an ex-employee who basically took a video camera around and went around it in its closing days and stuff like this. There's a huge history there, and none of that was touched upon. It was all this, yeah, you know, Commodore was amazing and great. I think Commodore's biggest problem at the time is it never had like a Steve Jobs, you know, or a Bill Gates, or someone who stood up at the forefront of that company and was like the leader, and this is the main vision and stuff, and it completely failed on that. Well, it's probably why they failed as a whole, but no, it wasn't really. Oh, it was lightly addressed in that episode, and there was hints of someone at the forefront, and it was just a shame that there was no one at Commodore that could really drive that. And to be fair, the documentary, it did address that lightly in parts, but then again, it was an hour long, so I'm not sure what you could really expect from it. It was more of it's like in the UK, we have a lot of these documentaries appear on the television, and Channel 4 seems to be like the big producer of them over past years, and it was very similar to that. I mean, the video style and the editing was very, very professional, and everything was well filmed. It's not like it's been done by people in the bedroom filming YouTube videos. You know, there was a high professional element to it, but sadly for me, it just didn't go in depth enough, and it was a bit disappointing on that aspect. But on the other one, for someone just dipping into Commodore stuff, I suppose I'm quite new to it in a way, just having picked up and got into the podcasting stuff recently. But they just didn't go deep enough. So, yeah, I don't know whether to recommend that. It's 50-50 really. It was a bit disappointing on one hand, but on the other, I did learn some stuff more about the engineers, and some of the interviews with them were quite interesting, and I'm sure it's been covered in more in-depth stuff in other areas. I am going to tackle the From Bedroom to Billions, the Amiga years soon. I need to sit down with that because I think that's about 2.5 to 3 hours long, so I'm a bit stuck in the middle. We'll see how it goes. This week's game is going to be something that personally appeals to me. I have a fair bit of history with, and back in the day, and probably still to this day, to be honest, it's probably one of the most intriguing and interesting and humorous games I've ever played, and the one I've picked is Secret of Monkey Island. Now, before some of you stop listening and turn away and think, oh god, I'm sure we're sick to death of hearing about this one, because it is one of the big titles, so to speak. But the point of this podcast is to go back, look into the history of stuff where possible, and mix in my own experiences with it, my own opinions and stuff. And Secret of Monkey Island has always been there. I mean, for years, this was the title that I would go back to repeatedly. I would always do, every other year, I'd do a full playthrough of 1, 2, and 3, because I actually quite like Curse of Monkey Island, even though it wasn't, I don't consider it canon, but with the voice acting and stuff, it was just perfect. I mean, sadly, we'll never get to cover that, because it just did not come out on the Amiga, which was a shame, but, it was a sign of the times and so on. But, Monkey Island, I think lead developer was Ron Gilbert, who was the guy behind Manic Miner. I've got that written down in my notes. No, Manic Mansion. I'm sorry, that's my stupid writing there. With Tim Schafer and Dave Grossman, again involved with the developing, and I think they helped with the writing as well. Now, this was published over in the US. Everyone knows it as Lucasfilm. I mean, they were also involved with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which prior to this is probably one of me. I think it was the first graphic adventure I ever actually saw, and it's, again, that holds a special place. I mean, I don't want to go into the story of that one because we're on Monkey Island, but, as a kid, it was one whenever I got a chance to play, I was absolutely addicted to, and I would complete that one so many times, and I think that was the one that started me on this path with the rest, and once Monkey Island came along, that was it. I was addicted to it. But over here in the UK, I think it was the US Gold who released it, and that would have been 1990. Now, later on, when the game first came out, it had like text inventory, so, a bottle of beer, which is grog, would just be written down as grog, and you'd select the text, and, you'd have the use, pick up, push, pull, and etc. on the left-hand side. Now, they did change that much later on, but as far as I'm aware, and I did look into it, even when they released a Kix re-release of Monkey Island, I'm 99% sure that they didn't actually redo the icons, because on the PC port, or the VGA version, you can actually see, it's always been a VGA version, I'm just adding that on, but there is actually big colourful icons, and they're actually to match in line with how it was with Monkey Island 2, and it works really, really well, and dropping the text worked beautifully for that game because it just ups the artwork and stuff. But it's well worth. It's probably the only version you'd find today, because who plays a text inventory version where you can get the good old VGA style with the fancy graphics. But yeah, I've got a few notes here. Like, actually, the first indie game which I was going to refer that. Ron Gilbert himself said that the puzzled within that. I mean, he considers indie to be his first proper graphic adventure. They were working with a lot of Simpsons. They'd moved away from the Manic Miner. They moved away from the Manic Mansion style game. They wanted to branch out that whole system a lot more, and they started doing a lot more they practiced and developed a lot more ideas and systems and how the puzzles worked and so on in indie. And that was his first push at doing something like that. And because he had that opportunity to polish it round the edges, it made Monkey Island the actual better game, because I think there was only a year in between the development time. So it wasn't, it was all quite quick and rushed at times. If you think about it, the indie film came out in 89 and Monkey Island came out in 9. So his lips were just barely 12 months there between the two. Now, of course, as I'm sure you're all aware, the game is based around a chap called Guybrush Threepwood, who is only pretty young. I think he's about 18 and 19 in the game. He's basically a kid. He even looks like one on the cover. But he's absolutely useless. He's a typical teenager, comes along to this island, wants to be a pirate. I mean, even his name, everybody knows this, but, Guybrush Threepwood, he was named after a tool in D-Paint, which was the popular Amiga design choice at the time. Just absolutely ridiculous. And the push behind it all, because the common story is that it was all based around the Pirates of the Caribbean ride over at Disney, which there is a lot of things brought over from that, which you see. I mean, I think in particular, there's 3 guys you meet in the main town itself, and those are actually based on the pirates that were within the ride. I've never been to America, by the way, so I don't know the ride. I'm only going off what I've been told, but you can see this throughout the game, and there's also this whole, it's very much themed around that old sort of like Errol Flynn type movie, the proper pirates and the swashbucklers and all that stuff, but it works in tandem with the humour. Very, very, strange mix. It was also, I believe, the first game where they actually implemented they removed deaths. I mean, Ron Gilbert actually come out and said, he really didn't like deaths in the likes of the Sierra games. It was really soul destroying to be stuck on a puzzle and to keep dying or to walk very short distance and get killed in a trap or something like that. So he purposely went through and they pushed that side of it out, and it later became the main mantra behind Lucasfilm on LucasArts games, that you could not die in any of these graphics adventures. There is a couple of jokes within the game. There's one moment where you fall off a cliff and you think, oh God, I'm dead. And it's just a joke that'll pop up, and it actually says, you're dead. And then the graphics keep spanning down and Guybrush lands in a rubber tree, and just a picture of a tree, and it bounces and shows him slinging back up and landing on the cliff. And then it says, oh, look, how lucky you landed on a rubber tree. Stuff like that. And I think the only other opportunity to die is much, much later on in the game, where I don't want to really spoil the story, do I? Because you probably want to play the game through if you haven't, after listening to this. But you basically get stuck and thrown into the ocean and left to drown. And if you don't solve the puzzle within a certain time, you can actually die. But it's not the most complicated puzzle in the world. It's really, really easy. It's dead obvious. It's one of them. It just look really carefully about what's surrounding you. You'll solve it. But it was a really clever way of hinting and pulling deaths away, and all the future games just really, really pulled that out. I mean, he's also been quoted as saying that he had no real plan for any sort of story, which does come across in the game a bit, because it bounces from side to side in different tales, because it's all about a developing romance, or what Guybrush thinks is a developing romance, but does actually change as the story goes on. And it's all mixed into this crazy pirate theme, and ghost pirates and ghost ships and exploring and fighting with pirates and sword insults and exploring. I'm getting crazy pirate trials, crazy things like this. But they had no set idea of what they were going to do for the story, and were pretty much making it up as they went along and try to put all these funny bits in. And Ron Gilbert has actually said that he will never reveal the actual secret of Monkey Island. You never find it out in the first 2 games, which is what Ron worked on. But he did actually say on Twitter, this was about a year ago, when he was working on Thimbleweed Park, which was his Kickstarter version of a Manic Mansion type game, where he went back to the 80s and redesigned it using modern tools. And it's not turned into some 3D mess. It's really, really gorgeous, and the art style and neon flashing lights and really fancy graphics, but as if it was designed in the 80s. It works brilliant. I'd really recommend it. But, during the push for all this, he actually said in public And it was like tweeted and shared to like crazy. And he said to Disney, because they're not using the Monkey Island license anymore, he says, I will actually pay you serious money to take this back off you. And he's actually said that they didn't respond. He's had nothing back from him in kind. So because of that, we will never actually find out the secret, because his plan was, if he got the chance to do it again, he would do his own third game and tell the story properly. But he's probably going to take that secret to his grave unless Disney lets him have the license. Or he doesn't want to buy the license just to use. He wants to take it back as his own separate thing. But seeing as the Monkey Island side, it's dead. I mean, they've not touched it in years. They make very little off re-releases, or they should just release, just for the sake of us all being able to find out that secret. One of the biggest plus points this game has, especially when you first start out, is the music, because it's this odd mix of Caribbean and it's all on them sort of thumping instruments, and it's really soft and dramatic, and it builds in parts. And when you start out and you first see Guybrush walk onto the island, and you've heard this tune playing along, and then it just softens out when you first introduce and say, I'm Guybrush Threepwood and I'm going to be a pirate. It really draws you into that whole world and sets you off on the beginning of the adventure. But as the whole game spans out and spreads out in places, the music is still some of my favourite game music to this day. I mean, as the games have gone on, they've revisited these tunes and they've jazzed them up a bit, and I think probably Curse of Monkey Island is probably my favourite rendition of them all, because when they redo them and they expanded them, because the late 80s when they were making this, late 80s, early 90s, it was very limited in what they could do with MIDI type tools, and even I think it's still early days, so the sampling wasn't exactly amazing. But what they managed to build with that, from that little bit and then expand out later, was just absolutely fantastic. And it's still, just hearing that original tune kick in sometimes, it still tickles the back of my mind, and it just sets me off, and I just think, this is some of the greatest game music I've ever heard. That, the main title sequence of Monkey Island, where it focuses on the island and it draws in, and then the music starts, it's slow and it builds and it builds. It's absolutely amazing. And even if you don't want to play the game, I would recommend you go and listen to some of it, because it's original, it's wonderful. I'm getting quite excited about it now. It always sets me off going. Now, add to that, it was it's a bit of text, it's a bit of music, but the great thing about it is that they created this world of islands where you explore. They're absolutely huge. There's so much that goes on in them. In particular, when you're exploring the first island in the main game, one of the things you have to do is this sword fighting or insult fighting, and you've got. It's very odd to describe if you've not seen it, but it's all text based, but you go up to someone, draw your sword, they draw theirs, and then you throw an insult at them. One of the classic ones is you fight like a dairy farmer. And in them few seconds, you have to come back with a response, a decent reply. If you don't, you get pushed back because they swing the sword at you. And in that one, they come back with, how appropriate, you fight like a cow. But the thing is, the insults are all different. It's very cleverly worded, because they never give you the initial remark, what you have to bounce off. You have to be clever, read what they've said. You have to work out what's a good response to what they've said, until there's a challenge later on where you're fighting someone who's an absolute expert. And the words, it's such a wonderful way they do it, because it's actually really complicated. And you have to properly look at the responses you've been collecting as you've been going along, and come back with just the right one. It just works wonderfully well. I mean, the whole story, as I mentioned before, especially with the way it ties in with humour, it has a lot of things like modern references, just clever ones mixed in there. There's a grog machine, which is basically a Coke machine with that famous logo on the front that you see on. There's a bit of modern tech, and there's a salesman tied in there, and there's one joke bit where you go into a bar and there's a guy sat there with a big badge on saying, ask me about Loom. And the guy doesn't speak at all. He will not hardly respond to you until you actually ask him about Loom, and then he just breaks out into paragraphs of conversation. And it's just a little slight tweak of humour like that. Loom's a very good game, by the way. But it just works extremely well, and it's not like you get a little bit of funny here, lots of tiny humour dotted around. The full game is some great stuff. I mean, proper laugh out loud jokes spread throughout this, and it's well worth visiting just to go through and read some of them, and it's all related to the world. And again, it's one of them things where it builds that world and that atmosphere around you, and it just draws you in. You've got the gorgeous music and the way it's all designed and the way it looks, and works really, really, really well as a package. And I have to say, it's genuinely funny, which for a game like this, considering from the time to even to this day when I go back and do the odd play, I'm not just doing that because I actually find the game funny. It does get even better, I think, with the sequel, but for the time, it was like a proper shot out of the blue, out of the dark. It's just like, it's like lightning in a bottle, what you sees there, and it really, really works well. I mean, the other thing that ties in well with it too is the puzzles in the game. They're not overly difficult, I don't think. Most of them, if you sit there and scratch your head, you can sort of work your way around it. I mean, I can remember back because I didn't have like the internet or anything like that. When I was playing this through on, it would have been my Amiga 600, installed to the hard drive, I might add, very excitable. But I was so stuck on this one point on a pirate ship later on. I had no idea of what to do, and I'd spent like 2 or 3 weeks trying to figure it out, and I just gave up. And I was crazy. I was only about 10 or 11, and I started ringing people I knew at school. And asking them, looking them up in the phone directory. I don't know why I even thought this was a good idea. I was just young and stupid. And then just by chance, I remember vaguely someone had sort of hinted at playing it at one point. And I never even spoke to him before. And I was talking to him on the phone. And he sounded as surprised as I am at just thinking back to it. And he actually told me the answer and gave me a clue. So, thanks there, Chris. That's, one of the more pleasant memories from the past, but I actually got past that part thanks to him, so I can't complain. Now, of course, no game is perfect, and I will admit that I was trying to find some bad points, and I really sat down, I was scratching my head trying to think of something to come up with, because it's just, the whole thing just summed up. It's really difficult to poke holes in, but of course it does have its issues. I mean, even for the time, the graphics weren't exactly fantastic, but again, compared to other things, it was probably about average. I mean, if you consider the fact, if you look at, say, Monkey Island 1 and Monkey Island 2, and there's just 2 years release between them, the graphics are on a whole new level on the second one. But again, it was the early days, so it's not really a bad point, and I'm picking at just straw. I'm just trying to find something I can clutch up on. Now, they did do a remake of both games where they redesigned the graphics and guy-brushed this terrible wavy hair, and it's okay. As a remake goes, it was right. They got the voice actor from the third game, really good, atmospheric, and they got a really good, LeChuck voice and everything, and it worked really well. But the problem is that the animation on Guybrush just didn't work, and it didn't look as good as you want it. They did improve it with the second game. It was a bit better, and the hair sort of went. But the first game really suffered from it, and I would hope if anyone ever tackled that again, they would redo the graphics in make it more suitable with what the first one should have actually, what it should have actually been. Now, the Amiga version does have a bit of a problem because, that I said before, it uses a text inventory, which is fine when you're playing the game, but it could have really done with the icons at the bottom, because when I played that much later, it improves the game greatly, because you're not reading through something and then trying to think of things to link a word to. You look at an icon, you see the rubber chicken there, you think rubber chicken with a pulley in the middle. That's a big joke from the game from later on, but, you look at it in the picture, you see it's got the pulley in the middle, and then you see a rope, and then in your brain, it just clicks, oh yeah, that's where it goes. Whereas you're reading a bit of text, rubber chicken with a pulley in it, it just doesn't stand out as much. Maybe that helps with actually stretching the game out a bit more, because it becomes more of a logic puzzle then. One of the other things, of course, one of the problems with it is the sword fighting, although it's quite good, it does have a problem, because what you're effectively doing is you're having to bounce back forth between pirates, which is okay for a while, but some of the replies that they give you, which you absolutely need to get through the main trials to defeat, like, the sword master of Melee Island, is you have to pick the right result or you lose against her, and she absolutely kicks your butt. But in order to get them all, you have to keep meeting pirate after pirate after pirate on the main Melee Island map and waiting across road, and they'll come walking down and they'll meet you and start a fight. And sometimes it can take probably 10, maybe 15 minutes of just waiting and restarting fight after fight. It becomes a bit tedious, a bit annoying, but again, I thought it light-hearted enough and enough humour just to keep you pushing on and stuff, because even they comment on it as it's going on a bit, like, oh, well, you're good enough to fight the Swordmaster, and you sat there thinking, no, I'm not, I need some more. But yeah, I mean, I'm really struggling to find issues with it, because every time I try and think back through games that might be problematic, I've just got such this like golden aura of, God, what a great game that was, and really I'm struggling. But yeah, let's move on. I'm sorry, I can't think of any more, but you know, my final thoughts on it. As you can probably tell, it's one of my all-time favourite games, and it's not perfect, it's not amazing. The story's pretty funny, it's pretty great. I think the second game just went the extra mile. It did even more things and made everything just absolutely wonderful. But it built off this. This is a proper, funny, solid foundation with a pretty entertaining story. You know, it's well worth going back to. The humour in it that's probably why it stuck with me for so many years, because if you have like a bland, boring character or bland people, NPCs that you meet, it's like, I mean, I must have put about probably 100 hours back in the day into something crazy like Oblivion on the Xbox 360. And thinking back to that now, and it's probably about 10 years later, 10 years later, I can't tell you next to anything beyond the main character, the Emperor in the game being Patrick Stewart, who dies in the first 5 minutes. And because nothing really stuck with me, none of it stuck out, but like the governor of Melee Island, the pirate characters, the pirates you meet on the ship, the voodoo lady, LeChuck, his pirate, all these characters just come crashing into my mind, and it's all because they've stuck, because they were well-developed characters and they were humorous and funny. And it's one of my biggest annoyances that it never got that proper third game, the Ron Gilbert linked story game. And even to this day, I can't tell you I couldn't even count how many times I've replayed this, because it's gorgeous. Just go out there and play it and stop listening to me. You should be playing Monkey Island. Anyway, guys, what perfect time to finish there. I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and I think we're improving episode by episode. By all means, help us out, leave a comment, or in particular, leave a review on the iTunes store, because we are going quite strong on there now. Each episode is getting bigger and bigger, and the numbers seem to increase, which is always a good sign. If you want to drop a line or contact me, in particular, I'm after suggestions for future games to tackle, because I will take a good close look at them and try and find out some history and stuff. And we'll see what we can come up with. Just go to it's facebook.com/AMIGArama. Stick a comment on there. Any suggestion I do, I will either reply or I'll definitely take a look at it if you think something suitable for the podcast, and we'll get back to it. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening, and look forward to another episode soon.